Okay, here we go, folks. This first book for the week is going to be Runes of Majesta, volume number 2.1, Creatures and Cupcakes, written by Taj McCoy L. It is 821 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. Mayah, Grax and Margaret, better known as the Royal Deathclaw, have just entered the prize dungeon they won in the Paladin's tournament. Now they just have to survive in the bowels of a sprawling, massive underground world filled with dangers around every corner and under every leaf. It's a gamer's paradise, but there's one problem. Our tiny heroine, pretty Princess Cuddle Fluff, is still stuck in the expansive VR game world of Majesta. It isn't half bad until Grax and Margaret log out and she gets reminded that her life is on the line. With her logout button inoperable and malicious AI searching for her in-game, she's struggling to get as strong as possible to survive the inevitable clash for survival, because in the dungeon, her chances of dying have just risen significantly. This novel contains big hammers, cats, enchanting, snark, grenades, necromancy leveling, fetch quest, beeps, and boops, misunderstandings of the deadliest kind, factory, industrial offenses, grandmothers, evil, sentient, computer viruses, truces, crafting duels, gearing, getting gear, friendship, happiness, sweet XP. Safe for kids, great for adults. So that's all in the novel description. There's actually a little bit more, but I'm not going to read that. I enjoy this story, but not as much as book one. That's kind of the review. Parts of the dungeon I felt like they went on a little bit too long, and it started to feel like kind of a grind to read occasionally. The brother story, which is a second introduced POV into this particular novel, it's funny. It's interesting in its own right, but it doesn't really feel connected to the main character's story, outside of a couple of specific instances. I kind of felt the same about the third point of view in this novel, which is the POV for the villain. If you're familiar with the first book, you're going to know what it is, but it isn't its own particular story POV. Point of view, rather. Very interesting kind of storyline, but again, feels completely unrelated to the book. And it feels more like it's set up for future novels. And that's not necessarily bad, but it is something that reduced my enjoyment of this particular novel. The author notes at the end of the story that he acknowledges that these particular things are specific story decisions. And I can absolutely respect that. I really do respect authors' and decision to include anything or not include anything, including the fact that the main brother has his own storyline rather than give him a separate one. The author also notes that the main character's storyline may feel a little anticlimactic to some people, even having characters within the story to kind of joke about that. But he notes that the dungeon arc isn't done, and then in book 2.2, he'll hopefully be able to continue that story and finish off by Christmas of this year. So basically, it feels like this story is only part of the intended book number 2. That's something the author addresses in the back of the book, of course, in the author note, that he had to kind of decide whether to make the brother's story its own kind of side novel, whether to delay the release of this novel by finishing the entire story arcs he wanted to, even though make it bigger than 821 pages. And those are, again, all author decisions, and I completely respect that. But at the same time, it does kind of leave me feeling as a reader, this is only part of a novel, part of an actual completed story, even though like each one of the storylines that are there has a resolution. And I'm not saying it doesn't, but they don't always feel connected to each other. And I feel like that was something that was intended for a longer story arc, where like maybe the brothers' story arc would eventually intertwine back in with the sisters, the main characters, or like that villain storyline would come into play somewhere. And none of that happens in this novel, which makes it feel a little less satisfying to me, because those are interesting storylines, but they don't really have any payoff in relation to the main character story, which is the person I came for. Again, I enjoy the novel, just not as much as book one. There were still the enjoyable things I liked from book one: the crafting, good funny banter, dialogue. The main character still shines as a plucky heroine, making intelligent decisions and not taking guff from anybody, while still maintaining her heart of gold, which is kind of the big draw for the story, in my opinion, is that unique main character. That again, you're not going to get a lot of kid main characters, female characters, or persons of color as main characters. And so all those things combine to make something special just with that aspect alone. And again, the rest of the writing is pretty decent. Action is good. Dialogue is definitely a highlight with the funny banter. But for me, this novel on a whole gets a score of 7.3 out of 10, which is, again, slightly slower than the initial novel, but still an enjoyable score for an enjoyable book. It's going to be Runes of Majesta volume 2.1, Creatures and Cupcakes, with a score of 7.3 out of 10.